during that really rough season, I took a job as a part-time receiving clerk at an aerospace company because it seemed stable. And so I took that job, which basically meant I was breaking down boxes and taking out trash for people. It was very part-time, but I was like, this pays the bills. I can live in this home. And that was during that rock bottom season. It was very humbling. But as soon as I devoted myself to God, I stopped treating it like something temporary and something that was just going to get me by. But I really fell in love with business once again. We start taking on all these little like side hustles, even if you have a 9 to 5 type job where it's like, well, I also do this, this, and this, and this. I was really good at saying to my superior, what is it that you want me to deliver?
You are listening to the 5 a.m. podcast, and today is your day. Welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast. I'm your host, Michael Klassen, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Alex Sanfilippo. Alex, welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here with you today.
Oh, me too. The honor and pleasure is mine for sure. I've been looking forward to this conversation. We've had it booked for a while. I know you're a busy man, so thanks for carving out some time. And ladies and gentlemen, there's no moss growing under Alex's feet, that's for sure. Alex, this might sound a bit odd, but I'm going to start out with failure. Many see it as something bad, but I know my personal experience, failure provides great value. And so your journey from selling those golf balls when you were 10 years old and having that mindset to becoming a podcasting entrepreneur is really fascinating. Was there a failure experience that was actually maybe an MVP in your life for you? I say most valuable player or person, but most valuable lesson, so an MVL.
Yeah, I like that MVL. I've actually not heard that before, but there was a number of them. And sure, I started selling used golf balls as a 10-year-old kid, which all that did was really fuel my passion and understanding of this idea of entrepreneurship and business. And I'd say my first failure, which by the way is needed in all of our lives, and it doesn't necessarily need to be such a bad thing. But if I didn't make some mistakes along the way, I wouldn't be the man that I am today. Like I needed to be brought down to like reality even. And I can think of my first venture after selling golf balls as a kid, right? Just with other kids in the neighborhood, which was really fun, was I started selling things on eBay. And I did really well at that. And a lot of it was toys. Again, I was just a kid. So I was selling like G.I. Joes, Legos, stuff like that, and buying them and flipping them and having a good time with that. Ultimately got into some real estate side of things, mostly on the tech side, but also as an investor myself at a young age. So this is like going through high school and past high school into college as a young adult. And you referenced it in the introduction, but 2008, I didn't see that coming. And of course, hindsight's 2020, right? Like now that I see it, I'm like, it was obvious, but it wasn't obvious to really any of us. And so I had kind of built up this bit of an empire in my own mind, if you will, leading up to that, having a technology company that supported real estate and being an investor myself with buy and hold strategy property. And I can remember one time though that I went to a dentist, and this is back 2000, probably 2007 when this happened. And that's before we were really like playing on our smartphones, right? Like you just kind of looked at the magazines, and one of the magazines was Forbes, and it was Forbes 30 under 30. Picking up, I went through it. I'm like, under 30, these guys are young to be really successful. And I was like reading through it, just waiting. And I can remember at that moment, I was like, man, I want to be a Forbes 30 under 30, and real estate is going to be my avenue to get there. I know I can achieve this and do this. And Michael, I say this regrettably now, but that really almost immediately became my full identity. At that point in my life, entrepreneurship was really what I grabbed onto. And I was brought up in a religious home, but not really a faith-filled home. And so I kind of wrapped my whole identity around this idea of entrepreneurship and deciding now I'm going to do this Forbes 30 under 30. And so I went all in on this real estate stuff. And that first big failure that you're referencing, that most valuable lesson, that happened when the economy just took an absolute dip. The company I had, which was doing really good, I think there were 7 employees total. I ended up just giving it to one of the guys who wanted to keep running it because we were going from doing 30 projects a day on homes to 1 a week. And I had to move into a rental property that I had no desire to move into. It was made to be a rental property, but I had to move into it because either that or the bank was going to take it. And man, that was my first reality that entrepreneurship isn't always sunshine and rainbows, right? Like there's actually some risk involved. And up to that point, I had never really had anything go wrong. And I needed that dose of reality. And Michael, that was my rock bottom in my life as well. Like absolute rock bottom was that moment.
Wow. So we've talked about the MVL, most valuable lesson. There's also a phrase that I've been known to use, don't rob someone of their rock bottom. So, what did your rock bottom do for you?
Yeah, so that rock bottom was the eye opener that I needed. And there's been people in my life that have known me since. I'm like, man, I felt so bad when you're going through all that. I'm like, please don't. Like, I needed that. And now I noticed that. But of course, at that moment, I was stressed, I was depressed, I was anxious, like all the feelings, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. What actually ended up happening is I was very alone at that point in my life because the friends I had started to develop were all people that were also going to be Forbes 30 under 30s. Or even the relationship I was in was very driven by my financial success, not by much else. And so I was really living a really wrong me-centered lifestyle, and the people that I was around were living the same way. We were hanging out with each other because we felt like if we could get something from each other, we could get ahead more. And as soon as the money stopped, everyone disappeared. And
Yeah.
I really felt alone again. Coming up from a religious background, I didn't really have like a faith element, so I didn't even feel like I had God in that moment.
Hmm.
And but I'll never forget. I got something in the mail one time. I was expecting it to be bills, and it was actually a flyer to a young adults church ministry.
Okay.
And in my mind, I was like, you know what? I grew up in church, and I was like, I don't know if I want to check this out, but the address makes it seem like it's literally across the street from where I live. And
Okay.
long story short, I ended up going. But Michael, it was a tough decision. I actually sat in the car. And because I was so like wounded and hurt at this
Mm.
point, this
Hmm.
rock bottom that I was in, like this was the moment where I was like, I'm not going to go in here. Like God doesn't want me. I've never done anything for God. There people when they see how much of a failure I am, they're going to disappear just like everyone else in my life. Like there's no reason for me to go in here. And I can't describe it, Michael, but I guess I can. I feel like it was the Holy Spirit just telling me like you got to get up and go. And so I just took courage, which courage means being afraid than doing what you have to do anyway. So I
Yes.
took courage. I got out of the car. I walked in, and man, I cannot describe it other than God just meeting me exactly where I was at. Is the first time I like really can say that I felt the love of God, and God just loved me for who I was, and like there was no strings attached. And it turns out that people felt that way as well. They loved me because I was created by God, not for any other reason. And I learned the lesson of love people for who they are, not for what they do. These people love me just because of who I was, which is a son of God. And man, I don't obviously don't mean to over spiritualize it, but like that was my big failure that I learned from, and then that was also my rock bottom, and
Yeah.
sort of the resurgence from that even. And it was just man, like my identity shifted from being this rich young guy to
Yes.
being a son of God, and that love I felt more successful when I had nothing than I ever did with all the success in the world that I had at that point.
Wow. And I'm sure there was a few people along the way after, you entered the doors, you met some people. There was probably maybe some people to whom honor is due for their discipleship and maybe putting up some guardrails for you and showing the way. Do you want to talk about how valuable that coming alongside of you and maybe taught you some things that you didn't even know you needed to know?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of these people, Michael. I actually think back to an episode of your show, and I'm going to call it out. I wrote down, I know the date because I just listened to it earlier, but
Okay.
June 16th, 2025. It was titled "Success Stories in Entrepreneurship," and it
Yeah.
was Nelson Parks you had on, and
Yes.
and he said, "Don't let yourself get away with developing bad habits. Have accountability partners, have mentors, and that will help you stay on track." And I love that was brought up. And by the way, I encourage everyone go back and listen to that episode afterwards. It
Thank
was
you.
very, very well done. And in that moment, I don't know if I realized I needed that, but there was other people who realized I needed that.
Yeah.
There's one person in particular that I'll never forget this. Like I started living for God, but think about all the garbage I just came from. I still carried all these bad habits and wrong mindsets. And you don't just learn it overnight. Maybe some people have like a revelation where it's just like a full 180. I knew where I wanted to go. I just was going to use the same tactics I use with everything else to get there. Right. So
Right.
there was one guy, his name's Chris Kolnicki, and love this man. And he took me to lunch one day, and we walked into, I think it was just like a TGI Fridays.
Okay.
He walked in with a Bible in his hand, and I was like, uh-oh, like what's gonna happen here? And he goes, hey man, I've got 5 things to talk to you about, and I think you're really living wrong. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. And like we knew each other well enough that like it wasn't just out of the blue. Like he had like the space to be able to do this. And he just opened the Bible and went through scripture. This is point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he's like, I feel like God told me to do this, and that's why I'm saying it all to you. And talking about doing a 180, that's actually what caused me to do a 180. He then became my accountability. We worked for different companies. We worked in the same, like, very large building. And so we'd see each other a lot. The funny thing about this, though, Michael, is he does not remember that lunch at all for some reason. Like, years later, we're still friends. So this was a very long time ago at this
Wow.
point. And it still gets brought up. But he's one of those people in my life that God used to say, hey, man, wake up. It's time for you to actually change. Like, you saying you want to do this, here's some practical ways to do that. And when he did that, it made me realize I want more accountability in my life. I want more mentors in my life. So I started seeking that out. And for me, a successful accountability relationship or mentorship is a give and take type of relationship. I can't just say, pour into me, help me, help me. I have to be willing to also do that myself. So the accountability, I started telling people, like, what can I hold you accountable for? How can I help you? Can we check in with text messages just every week? Anything like that. And to this day, I still do that. Whenever there's a mentor in my life, I make sure that I pay it forward with them. Hey, listen, you're really good at this. Can I help you with this? Because this is what I'm really good at. And
Yeah.
it's always helped me have really good relationships. But I'm telling you, like, having that in my life intentionally and making sure I'm the one being proactive about it has helped me excel so, so much because I was blind to many of these things. And yes, I want to follow God, but in many ways I didn't know how to. So Chris is one person I'll mention by name, and there was handfuls of others during that time that really helped me a lot.
Yeah. And so just a shout out to our viewers. You might be listening to us on FM radio and stuck in traffic right now. And of course, our hearts go out to you because nobody loves that rush hour traffic. But thank you for making 5 a.m. part of your commute. The reason I mentioned the commute is because that's one of the things that was part of your life in the aerospace career. And so we're going to get into that. Now, I won't ask the drivers to comment, but other people who are at a desk or a keyboard right now, feel free to put something in the comments of maybe tag someone who really impacted your life. And you're thinking, boy, without Chris, man, I'd be looking up at the top of my coffin. I'd be down with the daisy roots. But I've got to ask you then about this aerospace career. You spent quite a bit of time there, and you mentioned that it was a gift and a joy. And sometimes those cubicle or office opportunities are the farthest thing from a gift and a joy. But I want to ask you, what skill from that 15-year corporate experience proved maybe most valuable in your entrepreneurial ventures?
Yeah, I want to connect the gap for people listening and viewing right now. During that really rough season, I took a job as a part-time receiving clerk at an aerospace company because it seemed stable. And so I took that job, which basically meant I was breaking down boxes and taking out trash for people. It was very part-time, but I was like, this pays the bills. I can live in this home. And that was during that rock bottom season. It was very humbling. But as soon as I devoted myself to God, I stopped treating it like something temporary and something that was just going to get me by, and said, you know what? Like, if Jesus were to have this job, I think he'd treat it differently than I would. And I immediately started applying myself. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It's 15 years, as you already said, Michael, right?
Right?
Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't overnight, but over 15 years, I worked my way up through this company. And listen, I wasn't an astronaut, wasn't a skydiver, wasn't a fighter pilot. Like, nothing super interesting, and that wasn't part of the job, but we were manufacturing aircraft parts. It's mostly focused below the atmosphere, so they weren't going into space or anything like that. But I really fell in love with business once again. And I believe I acted like an entrepreneur inside of an organization, which has a term that's been coined Intrepreneur. And so for me, I just started learning and growing along the way. And with the foundation, my new foundation of, like, this is how I'm going to work for Jesus. This is where he's called me to be. And so I worked my way up, not to work my way up, not to get rich. Like, I didn't have that mindset anymore, but really because I wanted to help. I saw a company with great people working in it that really loved the work. They loved each other. They all had great families. I got to meet many of them, became personal friends with so many people in that organization. And so I just made a devotion that, like, you know what, this is where God has placed me. He blessed me with this job in 2008 when nobody could find work. I have a job. Like, I need to be mindful of that. And so over those years, I learned a lot of things. I think that one of the main things I learned, though, was to make sure that I knew the expectation and delivered on that. And what I mean by that is, I think that so many of us, we overextend even in our job. We start taking on all these little, like, side hustles, even if you have a 9 to 5 type job where it's like, well, I also do this, this, and this, and this. I was really good at saying to my superior, what is it that you want me to deliver ultimately? Okay, I'm going to deliver that at the highest level. And if I have more time, I will tell you, and you can tell me what else it is that I'm supposed to be doing here. And I just applied that all the way through. And I learned to not chase the distractions, the things that might get you promoted faster, all the extracurricular stuff. I just avoided all of that and just did the job that I was told to do at the highest level. And weirdly enough, you get recognized when you do what you're supposed to do really well
Yeah.
and with innovation in mind. And so I think, I don't know how to really describe that, Michael, but maybe self-discipline in a way
Hmm.
is what I learned from that. Like the understanding that like this is the expectation and I'm going to be self-disciplined to get that done. And focus could be in there as well. But those are some of the things I really took away from that. And I love that career. The day I left was a really sad day. I knew
Oh.
it was a calling thing to leave, but
Hmm.
I enjoyed what I learned there and enjoyed I can't say every day, most of the days at that company, I really enjoyed.
Right. And it certainly is. I'm hearing that quality of honor in that as well, of being able to honor those that are above us instead of we think we have to have this hate relation. I mean, there's movies made about it, right? And maybe terrible movies or comedies, whatever the case might be, of this love-hate relationship. But being able to bring honor and that valuable attitude to a business place can do nothing but catapult you forward. And one of the things that I've talked about when I've been a guest on a podcast or a podcaster host is that there's a chapter in the book of Proverbs for every single day of the month. And it's so valuable. Was there some books or some even like maybe scriptures, but the book of Proverbs or other books in your life that you think, wow, that one really helped me find out who I needed to be?
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Proverbs like that because I actually read Proverbs every day of the month and I just follow the day and it works
Yes.
out really beautifully like that. And that was something I picked up when I was in corporate, probably during a time when I had a bad boss. If I go back and think about it, I believe I had
Okay.
6 bosses total at different times, 3 really
Okay.
bad ones, 3 really good ones. There was like no in between.
Yeah.
And you're really tested when your boss isn't good versus good, right? When you have a good boss, it makes things a lot easier. But I needed I didn't have mentorship there. I didn't have accountability there. These bosses were very hands off, but usually very angry, right? But I still knew that, like you said, honor was really important. And so for me, like Proverbs was like the big thing, like showing up, honoring people because of their position, because God gave it to them. I always had to keep that mindset. I'm like, how, God, did you give this person this
I know.
position,
And
right?
why?
But I always made sure that I showed up in a way that was respectful, even when others weren't. I wasn't talking bad about them around the water cooler, right? Is a metaphor. Like that's when people would usually say stuff. I would not get involved in that, not because I was better than other people or trying to suck up or anything like that, but it was more so just because, hey, this is what we're supposed to do. And so that was really big for me. Another thing that I read that I really enjoyed, which is also more on the biblical side, from a foundation level, but a few different John Bevere books I really liked. And there's so many different series I really like, but there's one particular about like the empowerment that comes from walking with God, from walking with the Holy Spirit. And that really, really spoke to me when I realized that like Alex's strength has a limit and God's does not. And there's a way to really step in to receive that. I've always been very motivated. I'm just an entrepreneur by nature, so like I work really hard, and I never really noticed my limits until I got into this like serious career, right? Like this company ended up being a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. Like it was like not small time, and I was a young guy in that. But when I learned to lean on God, man, that helped so much more to like step out of my own strength. And still to this day, although I'm good at podcasting, I understand the industry really well, I've done my time. I still every morning spend time in prayer saying, God, like I want you to lead this, not me to lead it. And that's been really helpful. But most of it has come directly from the Bible. And I make sure that I spend daily time in prayer and reading.
Right. So I'm just getting this idea that maybe there's somebody listening in their car while they're sitting in traffic. They're hearing what you're saying and they're not as familiar with Christianity and religion as you or I might be. And they're thinking, so is this Jesus thing, is it like a life preserver? Is it a crutch? What is it? How
Yeah.
would you respond to that person?
To me, first and foremost, it's a foundation of life to live off of, right? Like it's what love is, and so for me, like I mean, it's so much more than that. I don't even know if I have time to like try to wrap it up,
Yeah.
but the reality is, it's just what I've chosen to devote my life to. And if someone's listening to this and they don't really understand it, that's okay. I would say read Proverbs anyway. Most of the leadership books that you've picked up, if you have picked up any, they pull all of it from Proverbs anyway. So you're just kind of going to the actual source of it.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm not one to try to over spiritualize things. Like I understand like the hard work that goes into these things, but I just let that be my foundation with this idea of love first. And that is my number one personal core value, to love first. And so the best example I have of love is Jesus from the Bible. And so that's why I decided to pick it up. And Jesus just really modeled it well. If you're a Christian or not, you just read the story of Jesus, you can say, yeah, that's a good foundation of love, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm not telling people like, hey, you need to shift things, you need to go here. It's not a crutch. It's nothing like that. It's a foundation to live on. And it starts with this whole idea of love. And again, everything I do in my life and my business is at that foundational level. So I wanted to go to the best source I could find. And so that's what I'd say to someone who's maybe not living that way. You don't necessarily need to be a Christian, but take a look at some of the principles in it, at least, because I think you would find it very
Right.
helpful.
Yeah, so I wanted to switch over to podcasting in the time that we have left. And I wanted to ask you about your creating a brand podcast that gained significant traction and actually very quickly. What specific strategies do you think contributed to that rapid growth?
Curiosity was number one. When I started that podcast was the end of my aerospace career. And I left by choice. I knew I wanted to leave. When the company went public, I realized that I felt more like a cog in the system than someone who could really like be an entrepreneur inside an organization. I mean, no disrespect by saying that. That was the goal. I helped take it public. I was on the team that did all that. But when we got there, I was like, man, this feels like work for the first time. And so I started this podcast out of a place of curiosity because I was wondering, like, hey, after 15, or at that time it was 13 years, so it was like a 2-year gap between me starting this process, actually leaving. But I wanted to know, like, what's it like to be an entrepreneur? Because I'm so disconnected. The world was a different place when I started. Like, think about it. There weren't smartphones last time I was an entrepreneur, really,
Right.
right? So, like, things have changed a lot. And so, curiosity is what I believe drove that podcast. Basically, what I was doing, it was coming up with the art of creating a brand. How do you build something for yourself? And I talked to people who had successfully left a 9-to-5 job to become a full-time entrepreneur. And I just wanted to capture the journey of how they actually did that. And each of them had their own little things. And so it was me being very, very curious. And I believe that makes a really great show. And I just brought what I bring to the table, which is
Right.
I'm very point driven. I'm very straight to it, right? Like I don't want to have like
Yeah.
long conversation that's not directly on something that's actionable. And a lot of people don't like that, but it turns out a lot of people do like that as well. So people that were also in the same boat as me saying, I'd really like to leave my job. I want to be an entrepreneur. Were really loving the content because of how it was delivered. I think that really separated a lot. And then I just asked anybody who would talk to me about it to share it. I said, can you
Right.
share it with one person? And when you share it with them, ask them to share it too. That's exactly how I said it. And I think that many of us, we kind of think like, how do I go viral? It's like, well, how do you just talk to one person and tell them to talk to one person?
Yeah.
And I think that it works really well that way. So it was like a slow and steady thing. It felt like it took 8 weeks to really build up to the size that it got, which some people might be like, oh man, I want to just post something and go really well. No, like it was slow and steady. Every day I was just doing the little bit that I knew I needed to do. And over 8 week period, it ended up being really successful. And people called it an overnight success. And I get that 8 weeks isn't that long, but it is longer than just one post or one thing. Like it took some effort to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly takes effort. Those good things take effort. And the get rich quick schemes are not get rich for the person who gets into them. No,
Very true.
so I want to ask you then, how do you measure success in podcasting beyond the download numbers? And maybe this is a metaphor for life.
Yeah, it might be. For me, it's all about impact. Going back to that foundation I just talked about of loving people, I want to know that what I'm doing is actually producing some form of love in somebody else. And so for me, I gauge the success of my podcast based off of who talks to me about it and how they talk to me about it. And my target's one person every day. I don't need 100 people to reach every day. If I can talk to one person every day that is sharing something saying, hey, this person really, or this episode of your show with this guest, they really added a lot of value. Here's what it did. Here's how it changed my life. That's it for me. That's what keeps me going. And occasionally I get to meet these listeners in person. I had one guy recently who I met in person, and he cried because he said my podcast has been so impactful.
Wow.
And that to me made, I'll do it for the next year just for that one thing. So for me, I don't really look at downloads too much. What I try to look at is this having real impact? Who have I talked to that's told me something that's really helped move the needle for? And if it helps that one person every day, I'm all in. I'll keep on going. And that's how I track success in every form of my life. Is it helping the one person that God put me here to serve today and help today?
Right. Wow. So you talked about how cell phones kind of came in and technology kind of changed. What emerging trends do you see shaping maybe the future of podcasting over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, this is actually, if it's okay, I'll talk about Podmatch for a moment here.
Yes. Yes.
So Podmatch ultimately became the product. And for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, Podmatch is a service that connects podcast guests and podcast hosts for interviews. You can
Hmm.
message on the platform and everything. You never have to exchange an email if you don't want to. The whole idea was basically, can we create something that's like a dating app, but instead of
Yes.
connecting people for dates, we connect people for podcast interviews. That was the whole idea around it. And really, I bring it up not to talk about my own product, but that's one of the things that came out of like this huge tech boom that we've stepped into. there was just a better way to do this whole thing when it comes to connecting guest and host. And Michael knows that's one of the cumbersome points of it. You're listening to this today and you don't care that it took Michael 5 weeks to schedule with me and like all the work that went into it, right? Like that
Yes.
doesn't matter. You're here for the conversation. And the idea behind it was, can we bring the right people together faster? And so I think that innovative things like that, that streamline the administrative work, is what we're seeing more and more of in the tech space. And it's a great thing. The reason for that is because, again, great hosts and great guests get to spend more time behind the microphone. So
Right.
in podcasting, in social media, all the tools that make it faster, more accessible, easier is making the ecosystem or the online space better for all of us. And
Yes.
so there's obviously the rise of AI, which I've done some with, and we've built AI into what we do. But the reality is, it's just making things simpler for all of us. And what
Yeah.
I do want to share with this, Michael, though, I tell people always be careful. Like, because you can do more doesn't mean you should do more. If we go back to my lesson that I shared in aerospace, like knowing what was expected of me and delivering just that, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important that podcasters or people of any type that are using social media, just because you can do more doesn't mean you should. Talk to the people that you serve, talk to that client that you might be looking for, and figure out what they want from you and just do that. And let the tools that are everywhere now kind of build a framework and a foundation around that one thing and just do the one thing. I know that
Yeah.
indirectly answers your question. There's just
No, it's
so
good.
much out there these
Yeah.
days.
Absolutely. So then on this podcaster line of questioning and conversation, what's the most common mistake you see new podcasters make when they're trying to monetize their shows?
Yeah, when somebody gets into it and they want to monetize, all of us have been preconditioned by big media to think that advertising is going to be the way to go. And I'm not saying it's not, it's just not from day one. If you've got 10 people listening every week and you want to monetize through advertisements, you're not going to get paid very much. And so I always remind people that, like, hey, yes, you can do that, but there's far more profitable ways when you get started. My big thing, once again, it goes back to who's listening and how can you help that person. The way I developed the idea for Podmatch was just 4 steps. And it's what I learned my whole time in that entrepreneurship podcast. So creating a brand, I learned 4 things. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but find your area of passion is number one. Get into the community of that area of passion. And then number 3 is to find a simple solution that that community is struggling with. And number 4 is to offer the fastest possible solution. And so when I think about monetizing a podcast, I think the same way. You're doing it because you're passionate. Now your job is to connect with the community around it any way you can. Find the people that are listening. If they're messaging you, if they're commenting, find a way to connect with them and ask them, what is it that you're struggling with?
Right.
And then offer the fastest possible solution. I'm telling you, being able to monetize that might only take a few people, and you might actually be doing a really big service. I think, again, what we get wrong is we think, hey, I need ads, I need sponsors, but maybe you don't. Maybe it's time for you to develop something of your own that can serve these people at a higher level because
Yes.
you're already passionate to do that.
That's right. So then how has your approach to guest selection evolved since launching your first podcast?
Yeah, a lot. So it's funny. If you wanted to hear the Creating a Brand episodes, they're now on the same feed, which is Podcasting
Okay.
Made Simple. So my current show is called Podcasting Made Simple, but the first 158 episodes are Creating a Brand episodes, if anyone's curious in hearing some of those. But my avatar, so who I believe is listening, went from someone wanting to become an entrepreneur to somebody wanting to podcast successfully. That's very different. So I had to shift who was coming on my podcast pretty aggressively. And so now I always just think about my avatar, my ideal listener, like who's listening to this and what is it they want? What they want is tactful stuff to learn how to grow, monetize, and streamline their podcast. That's ultimately what they're looking for. If they're the guests, because we also speak to guests, they want to get on more shows, they want to be able to deliver a better message, and they want to leave a legacy with what they do. So I make sure that all the guests understand some element of that really, really well before I bring them on the show.
Right. So for someone with limited resources, I feel like I could speak firsthand on this, but what would you recommend be your kind of that 80-20 recommendation for podcast growth?
Yeah, so podcast growth is an interesting thing because, again, preconditioned by bigger numbers, bigger things. So social media and podcasting are not the same thing, but a lot of us say, I need thousands of people listening because I have thousands of followers. They're not apples for apples. If you just think about when someone's consuming your content on social media, they're laying down in bed or waiting in line,
Yes.
killing time. And that's not a bad thing. That's just when you're doing that. When you're listening to a podcast, you're typically listening with intent. You're listening like someone is standing on stage and you're sitting in a seat. That is really, really powerful. So I always tell people, don't focus so much on growing the biggest numbers you can. Focus on the niche that you're in. And then do some research. Again, AI is a great tool. There's so many tools for this. Find out how many people are in that vertical, in that niche, are interested about, are talking about it. I know some people that have podcasts, and legitimately, there is only a few thousand people that would ever listen to that podcast, but they've got 1,000 people listening. That to me is serious traction. When there are 3,000 people in the entire world that are interested in this and 1,000 listen to your show, you have real traction. One third of your entire world basically is
Yes.
actually already with you, hanging out with you, spending time with you. So I always tell people, get narrow and don't focus so much on the high end number. Instead, think about the impact you're having on the people that you know you can serve. And that once again is why I go back to wanting to talk to my listeners. I want to
Right.
hear from them because when I do, I know there's not a lot of people who want to listen to a podcast about podcasting, right? But the
Yes.
ones that do, when I get to hear from them, like, this is working. This is having an impact. Growing your show can be good. It works better when you narrow it down and find a real niche, because then you're really standing for something that helps that person be able to find it.
Yes. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What a conversation this has been. We've ticked a lot of boxes in this short period of time. Now, if you're part of the podcasting world or you're looking to break into it, maybe you've got a book or an invention to sell, I've got a great resource that's worth waking up early for. And whether you're already behind the mic as a host, or you're sharing your expertise as a guest, or maybe you're just dreaming about this podcast revolution that we're in right now, definitely please head over to podmatch.com/free right now. Alex, my friend, I've got to say thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights. Absolutely a delight to chat with you this morning.
Yeah, Michael, thank you again for having me. Seriously an honor to be here with you today.
That was so good. And thank you to our viewers and listeners, wherever you might be. We do appreciate you joining in on this conversation. As I'm often apt to say, it's kind of like we're sitting in a diner. We're having maybe some lemon meringue pie for my friend Alex, and the diner coffee that can sometimes really hit the spot. So we appreciate you listening in, as you do when you're sitting behind someone in a diner. Obviously, you're going to eavesdrop. I totally get it. We appreciate you joining in on this conversation. If you haven't already, please help us grow the channel with a like, a share, and subscribe. And your friends are going to appreciate you sharing this one with them as well. And of course, thanks to our friends that have ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. We do appreciate your support, and you are helping with what we are working towards here at 5am podcast. So thank you everyone for being here. Until next time, please seize your day, enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all those delightful adventures in between. I'm Michael Klassen.